That dead girl. Take one.
Hello and welcome back to Infamous Indiana. I'm your host, That Dead Girl, and we just kind of like to hang out here and we talk about a true crime story from my home state of Indiana. Last week we started talking a little bit about the Shanda Sharer case, and this week will be no different. We will be going into part two of this story, and right now you're going to be looking for a part three as well, just because it's such a complicated case. I mean, a lot has gone on since this crime even occurred, and there's just a lot to cover. And I do want to say, just before we get started, that this week's video is going to be a little bit different in the sense that we are going to be going into a little bit of graphic detail about the crime itself. So if you don't have a strong stomach or you can't handle hearing things like this, then now would be the time to turn off and watch something else. In the last video, we kind of left off where Hope, Tony, Melinda, and Lori had tied Shanda up and drug her body through the ruins of the witch's castle. They took her jewelry, they were taunting her, waving a knife at her, basically just doing anything they possibly could to torment her. And I believe we talked a little bit about Lori making a torch out of a t-shirt and pouring liquor onto it and lighting it on fire to kind of, wave in Shanda's face and basically just taunt her and scare the crap out of her, I'm sure. So Lori is, waving this torch in Shanda's face, and all of a sudden she starts to hear something. So she looks towards the road and realizes that 4 or 5 cars are passing. Now, mind you, the witch's castle, Mistletoe Falls, whatever you may know it as, is private property. So at this point, Lori becomes paranoid that they're going to be seen or they're going to be caught by the police. So she tells the other girls that they need to choose a different location to carry out the rest of their plan. So the girls load Shanda back into the car and they attempt to go to a gas station. Now, Lori, not having the luxury of, MapQuest or a cell phone in the 90s, she gets a little bit turned around and doesn't really know where she's going. But they eventually come to a gas station, and Lori then goes inside to ask for directions. Now, mind you, Shanda is in the back seat of the car with Melinda, and Melinda is still holding the knife to her throat. So any opportunity she may have had to get help is clearly not going to come anytime soon. So while Lori is inside asking for directions, Tony decides that she's got to make a phone call. So she leaves Hope and Melinda in the car with Shanda. Now, you may be thinking, Tony's going to do the right thing here. She's going to go to this payphone. She's going to call, for help. She's going to put a stop to this before it goes any further. But unfortunately, you would be wrong. By Tony's own admission, she absolutely had no intentions of calling for help when she was making this phone call. She basically was just going to call her friend to sort of calm herself down and get her head on straight. And she was afraid that she would have a target on her own back if she didn't go along with what these girls were saying and doing, basically. Now, I definitely do question the fact that she did not take this opportunity to stop it or get help. I just don't understand how someone could be, I guess, that weak minded or easily manipulated into a peer pressure type situation like that. I mean, I know it happens all the time, every day, but probably not to this extent. So Tony ends up calling her friend Mike and she talks to him, he calms her down. Not sure if she had actually gone into detail about what was going on at the time, but anyway, she calls her friend and calms herself down and goes back to the car. So Tony makes her phone call, Lori gets directions, and they all get back into the car. And from there, they drive 50 miles to Madison, Indiana. Keep in mind, Melinda is in the back seat with Shanda holding the kitchen knife to her throat the entire car ride. And this definitely wasn't a pleasant car ride, to say the least. It said that she forced Shanda to remove her bra, and, she throws it up front to Hope, who's actually driving at this point. Hope proceeds to put on Shanda's bra while steering the car with her knee and laughing and taunting Shanda. So they continued to mock Shanda, who at this point is begging for her life. She's telling Melinda, I will never see Amanda again. I will never speak to her. I will do whatever you want if you just please let me go. But unfortunately for Shanda, Melinda had absolutely no intentions of showing her any mercy or forgiveness on this night. The girls eventually stop at a wooded area, and it's about a quarter of a mile away from Lori Tackett's house. The area is very secluded, and they pull Shanda out of the car yet again. Tony Lawrence would later claim that during this time she actually ran to Shanda and gave her a hug and begged Melinda to, just let her go. But Melinda told her, there's absolutely no coming back from this. She knows our names, she knows what we look like, so letting her go is not an option. So they've pulled Shanda from the car, yet again. And at this point, Shanda's distraught. She's crying. She's, hurt badly and in fear for her life. Melinda then forces Shanda to remove her clothes so she can, quote, keep them as a souvenir. So Hope was in the driver's seat, so she's still been in the car this entire time. Tony decides that she is, for whatever reason, just going to take herself out of this situation all of a sudden, so she gets back into the car with Hope, leaving Melinda and Lori outside alone with Shanda. Hope and Tony would then watch from the car as Lori held a half naked Shanda up by her arms as Melinda began to beat her. So Melinda is just brutally beating Shanda. She can't do anything. She's being held back by her arms. She has no clothes on. Yeah. Then Melinda actually tries to stab Shanda in the back of the neck with the kitchen knife. And it said that, Hope sees this and then she jumps out of the car. So she's outside with Melinda and Lori and Shanda for just a short period of time, and then she comes running back to the car. Tony then asks her friend, why are you trying to help them? And to which Hope tells her, I wasn't trying to help them. I was just trying to pull Shanda away. There are other claims that during this time she actually held Shanda down while Melinda and Lori took turns stabbing her in the chest. Lori then retrieves a rope from the trunk of the car and wraps it around Shanda's neck and begins to strangle her. It said that Hope and Tony remained in the car, scared and holding hands, while blasting the car stereo to drown out the sounds of Shanda's screams. And eventually, there would be no more screaming. The screams would stop. Thinking that Shanda is finally dead, Melinda and Lori pick up her body, throw it in the trunk of Lori's car, and proceed to head back to Lori's house. They sneak into Lori Tackett's house and they leave Shanda in the trunk of the car. Melinda and Lori are in the bathroom washing Shanda's blood from their bodies, and Hope and Tony are waiting for them in Lori's bedroom. It's said that during this time, Lori and Melinda are laughing and making fun of the situation, making jokes about everything that they had just done to Shanda. Hope and Tony are obviously, they're shook, they're freaked out. They're not saying too much. They're just taking in everything that Lori and Melinda are saying. Lori notices the tension in the room and she basically tells everybody that everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be just fine. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. She then proceeds to get out a bag of rune stones and read the girls' futures, ensuring that, everything's going to be okay and they're not going to get caught. Nothing bad is going to happen to them. So while they're reading their little rune stones and whatnot and giggling and laughing at Shanda's expense, they hear a dog barking. So they stop talking and they can actually hear Shanda from inside of the trunk screaming and trying to get out. Lori is committed at this point, so she tells the other girls, I'll just go take care of it. And she goes to her kitchen and retrieves a paring knife, making sure to walk back through her bedroom and wave the knife at the girls. She just had to make sure that they saw, what she was about to do. Lori goes out to the car, opens the trunk, and stabs Shanda several more times. She returns to her room with the knife covered in blood yet again. So she cleans herself up and then proceeds to tell the rest of the girls it's time to go country cruising so we can get rid of this body. Hope and Tony refuse to leave, stating that they're too tired, they just want to go to sleep. So Melinda and Lori will go alone to get rid of Shanda's body. So they start to drive, and Melinda turns to Lori and asks her, is she really dead? Is Shanda actually dead this time? And Lori would look at her and say, I don't know. It's then that Melinda suggests that they should burn Shanda's body, and Lori agrees. Keep in mind, they've already tormented this girl. They've beaten her, they've strangled her, they've stabbed her multiple times, even in the bottoms of her feet, like to keep her from escaping. They've stripped her down, and now they want to basically burn her alive because she is still alive. Lori then drives about 50 yards away from her house to a burn pile where the Tackett family would burn their trash. And at this time, it's around 2:30 in the morning, so Shanda's been enduring all of this torture since about 12:30 that night. So earlier, when the girls were fleeing from the witch's castle because they were afraid they would be seen by somebody, in the rush to get out of there, Lori had actually torn the muffler off of her car. So as they approach the burn pile, her car is just very loud and very noticeable. Her car was actually heard by two men who lived in a nearby trailer named Michael Starsky and Ace Newman. So these guys, worked at a restaurant, worked the late shift, and they had just gotten home and were working on their sink or something like that when they heard the car. So as Melinda and Lori are gathering things to try to start a fire, Lori actually notices Ace peering at them from a window in the trailer. So obviously Lori is kind of familiar with her neighbors, so she knows that they actually have a working pop machine on their front deck. So she decides to kind of do some damage control and actually go up to the trailer and ask the two men for change so she could get a soda. Now, when she gets up there, they're making small talk. He gives her the change and she gets a pop and she just exclaims, yeah, sorry, my muffler's broken and I'm just trying to fix it. The two men would offer to help Lori, but she would refuse their help, saying, oh no, I got it. It's totally fine. I can fix it myself. So Lori realizes that this might not have been the best idea. They can be seen, they're going to get caught. So she tells Melinda to get back in the car and that they should just drive around and let Shanda die slowly. At some point in this part of the drive, they actually come to a bridge, and Lori suggests that they just throw Shanda's body off the bridge down into the creek below. And Melinda is just not having this because she is super adamant that Shanda's body must be burned. So as they're stopped, Lori actually grabs a tire iron from beneath her seat and tells Melinda that they should get out and open the trunk to see if Shanda is still alive. And much to their surprise, when they opened the trunk, Shanda actually tried to sit up and she uttered one word, and that word was mommy. And this would be the last thing that Shanda Sharer would ever say, even though she continued to live in torture for several more hours. Lori then brings the tire iron down on Shanda's head multiple times and closes the trunk again. So at this point, Melinda and Lori are actually beginning to become a little panicked. They're asking themselves, why won't Shanda just die? And as they drove along, they began to hear strange sounds coming from the trunk yet again. Melinda would later go on to say that it wasn't like screams or yells, but it was like something was wrong with her throat. It almost sounded like a gargle. I know at one point she was actually trying to say my name. So, yeah, they stopped the car again. Yeah, again. And this time, Lori tells Melinda to get in the driver's seat and lay on the gas of the car to drown out the sounds. She returns to the car a few minutes later, covered in blood and waving a tire iron in Melinda's face, exclaiming, "I hit her in the head. It felt so cool. I could actually feel it going in." Just fucking disgusting. Melinda then claims that Lori would actually wave the tire iron under her nose and ask her to smell it, to smell the blood. Melinda would claim that she took the tire iron from Lori and threw it in the back seat, telling her that she was disgusting and making her sick. Kind of find that hard to believe when, this entire evening they've both kind of just been like tag teaming this poor girl. It's just, ugh. And I don't know if Lori is feeling some type of adrenaline rush from all this abuse and torture she's dishing out, but she actually tells Melinda, "You just gotta come back here and see her. Oh my god, she's covered in blood. She's all red." And this would continue on for several hours. They're driving, they start to hear sounds again, they stop the car, they get out, they beat her. Shanda would eventually endure more than 7 hours of torture before finally succumbing to the multiple injuries. Just before sunrise, Melinda and Lori returned to the Tackett house with Shanda still in the trunk, clinging on to life. Melinda and Lori would go on to tell Hope and Tony about their great adventure, driving around, and every time they heard Shanda, they would get out and beat her some more. And they were laughing about this. They thought it was funny, they were really getting a kick out of the fucking bullshit that they were doing. And it's just absolutely disgusting to me and just infuriating, to be honest with you. Now, mind you, Lori and Melinda have been gone for hours, leaving Hope and Tony alone at Lori's house, where I'm sure, in the 90s there was a landline phone. Neither of these girls took an opportunity to pick up the phone and call the police or call their parents or even tell Lori's parents what was going on. They did not try to stop it. They went right along with it. Being scared of somebody is absolutely no excuse to watch another human being go through something like that and even participate in it. It's just mind-blowing to me. So at this time, Lori, she's just giddy and, like I said, on this adrenaline high because she's a sick motherfucker, and she actually asked the other girls if they would like to come outside and take a look at Shanda inside of the trunk, if they'd like to see, her body and what they've done. So Tony actually tells Lori, no, I don't want to see that, but she's actually surprised when Hope steps forward and says, "Yes, I want to see. I want to see what she looks like." So Lori opens the trunk and, Hope is looking down at Shanda's body and she just decides that it's a swell idea to grab a bottle of Windex from the trunk and proceed to spray Shanda's wounds with the Windex. And while she did this, she was saying things to Shanda like, "Not so hot now, are you, bitch?" Like, seriously. Hope would later go on to testify that there wasn't an inch of Shanda's body that wasn't covered in blood. So after, Hope's Windex fiesta, they decide to get back in the car and now they are going to go find a place to burn Shanda's body, to get rid of their evidence. The girls get into the car and they head for a gas station. Now, when they arrive at the gas station, they purchase a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi and some gasoline. They would then dump the Pepsi from the bottle and fill it up with gasoline. From the gas station, they drove on back roads until they arrived at their final destination, which was Lemon Road. So they get to the road, and this area is surrounded by soybean fields basically on either side. It's, I believe, a gravel road and pretty secluded, not too many people around to see or hear anything. Tony decides to stay behind in the car yet again while the other girls begin to wrap Shanda up in the blanket, the same red blanket that Melinda had been hiding under in the back seat earlier, in the story. They threw Shanda roughly on the ground, and it said at this point, Lori had tried to hand the bottle of gasoline to Melinda, and she shakes her head no. So then she tries to hand it to Hope, and Hope says no, to which Lori just forces her to take it and says, just fucking pour it. So Hope empties half of the Pepsi bottle of gasoline onto a still alive Shanda. Lori then lights a match and throws it onto Shanda's body without even flinching. So they've lit Shanda's body on fire. So the flames are starting to die down, and they decide that they need to go back. So they pull back up, and this time it would be Melinda who would get out of the car and dump the remainder of the gasoline onto Shanda's body. And this time, she was engulfed in flames. So while they're sitting down to breakfast at McDonald's, Tony ends up telling the girls that she needs to call the friend who she's supposed to be staying the night with, to make sure that her cover hasn't been blown and that her mom hasn't tried to check on her or anything. So she picks up the phone and she calls this friend, but what she actually does is confess to this friend everything that's just gone on. But she also makes her friend promise that she won't tell anybody anything that she's just told her. So basically, these girls have been up all night, driving around, torturing and killing a 12-year-old girl. And, they finish their McDonald's breakfast and they return to their respective homes. So they make a pact that none of them will tell a single soul, what has gone on and what they've done. Now, while the girls are trying to go about their day as normal, two quail hunters actually come upon Shanda's body on Lemon Road. Now, as they first approached the road, they thought someone had played a prank, like someone had possibly burned a mannequin or something like that and just laid it in the road. But what they actually found was what they believed to be a body of a young woman. And back in New Albany, Indiana, during this time, Shanda's father, Stephen, is awaking to realize that his daughter is not sound asleep in her bed where she should be. He immediately calls Shanda's mother, Jackie, and, they begin to call all of Shanda's friends, including Amanda Heverin, to see if anybody has seen or heard from Shanda. And at this point, of course, nobody has seen or heard from Shanda because Shanda is dead. Shanda's parents would then file a missing persons report with the Clark County Sheriff's Department. The quail hunters call police and, tell them what they've discovered on Lemon Road. The first to arrive on scene was Jefferson County Sheriff Richard Shipley. He quickly realizes that this case is way out of his league. He's going to need forensics. He's going to need way more men than he has at his disposal. So he then contacts state police. Detective Steve Henry and lab tech Curtis Wells would then head immediately to the scene. The first thing they notice when they come upon the scene is that Shanda's body is in what they call a pugilistic stance. I think I'm saying that right, but basically what that is like your arms are up, your legs are bent like inward towards your body, almost like a fetal position kind of. And I guess this is a telltale sign for them that this person has been burned while still alive. They could also tell that it was a young woman in her, teens to early 20s, and they immediately suspect foul play. They believe, she's been kidnapped possibly by some type of predator, but never in a million years, I don't think they would have thought it would actually end up being 4 teenage girls. The search and evidence collection went on for about 7 hours, well into the night. Investigators took casts of tire tracks found at the scene, knowing that Lemon Road had actually been re-graveled only 3 days prior to this, finding. They also found a half melted 2-liter Pepsi bottle and collected red fragments from the blanket that Shanda had been wrapped in. The coroners finally arrive and they take Shanda's body to King's Daughters Hospital in Madison, Indiana. Now, at some point during this day, as you can imagine, these girls, the wheels are really starting to turn in their minds. And yes, they've all made a pact or taken a vow of silence, if you will, but that doesn't last very long. Melinda and Lori are at Melinda's house, and Melinda actually ends up calling her friend to come over. And, she's distraught. She just needs someone to talk to about everything that just happened. She would also try to contact Amanda, but Amanda actually wasn't home during this time. She was at the mall with some friends. So, what Melinda does is she actually calls the mall and has them page Amanda over the intercom. So they all get into Lori's car and they drive to the mall to pick up Amanda. And Amanda gets in the car and she immediately sees that there's something really wrong with Melinda. She's hysterical. She's in tears. She's just out of it. So Melinda begins to tell Amanda everything they had done, and she tells her that Shanda's gone. Shanda's dead. At first, she doesn't believe this, but they actually open the trunk and show her, the bloody handprints and things like that still left on the inside of the trunk. And then she realizes that, this shit is serious. They're absolutely telling the truth. And during this time, it's said that Amanda goes back home and goes upstairs to her room and reads a letter from Shanda and cries. Doesn't think about calling police or telling her father or basically alerting anybody. It's just unbelievable. So, as I said, these girls are kind of blabbing to, anybody who will really listen to them about what they've done. And Toni Lawrence actually goes to work the next day. She works at Arby's. So I'm just sitting here picturing her trying to serve curly fries, knowing that she just basically assisted in the torture and murder of a 12-year-old girl just hours, before. But anyway, her boss notices that she's off, something's not right about her, and she, tells her to go home. Well, Toni's parents weren't home to give her a ride, so she calls Hope Rippey, and they decide together, they're going to go to the bowling alley where it's safe. There's older boys there, essentially they're both afraid that because they didn't participate as much as Lori and Melinda did in what happened to Shanda, they were afraid that, Melinda and Lori were going to come after them now. So they go to this bowling alley and they're hanging out with a few boys from their school. So they're hanging out with these older boys from their school, and they basically sit there and they tell these boys, well, we know about two girls who killed a 12-year-old girl last night and burned her alive. So again, for the second time, these boys are telling them, you have got to go to the police. You have to say something. She could still be alive. You could save her life. You could save your own life for that matter. And they agree, but do they actually go through with it and call the police? They don't. So one of the boys who was at the bowling alley, his name was Sean Piles, and he actually tells his father what Hope and Toni had told him, and his father takes him into the police and he gives a statement. And he also gives them Hope Rippey's name and Toni Lawrence's name. So while Sean is giving his statement to these police, they actually get a call from Jefferson County stating that they have a young girl who has come in and told them a very similar story about a young girl being murdered and burned alive. And that girl would actually end up being Toni Lawrence. She finally, got up the gumption, I guess, if you will, to go in and actually tell somebody what happened. So you're thinking maybe, oh, yay for Toni, she has a conscience, but not really, because she ends up lying to the police. She actually tries to tell the police that she and Hope had been dropped off before, the crime occurred. They weren't actually there. They just heard about it from Melinda and Lori. Toni stated that she had been dropped off at 9:45 in the morning, and the cops realized that this could not be true. There's just no way the time wasn't adding up. Shanda's body had been discovered on Lemon Road around 10:30 a.m. So from 9:45 to 10:30, there would have been no way for Melinda and Lori to drop Hope and Tony off and then get back to Lemon Road, before then. Tony tells them Lori Tackett's name, and she also tells them Melinda's name, but she actually doesn't know Melinda's last name. She also tells them that they probably wouldn't have heard of Melinda as they had Lori Tackett because Melinda was not from Madison. She was actually from New Albany, Indiana. So as soon as they get Lori's name, they go to the Tackett house and, they want to speak to Lori. They want to ask her some questions. So when they get there, Lori's parents come to the door and they tell the police that, Lori's actually not there. She's went to stay all night with her friend Melinda. So again, this Melinda name is popping up for a second time, and they still have no last name though, but that would not last for very long. They were then contacted by New Albany's probation department, and it was actually the same officer who dealt with the case between Melinda and Amanda Heverin. Remember in the last video, Amanda Heveron's father found out about their relationship and found sexually explicit letters between the two, and he took this information to police. And he, had confronted Melinda with this information, saying, if you don't leave my daughter alone, I'm going to call the police and we're going to press charges. So this officer is able to give them, Melinda's last name, Melinda Lovelace, and an address and all that information. And he also informs them that he is in possession of the letters between Amanda and Melinda. And in these letters, Melinda is threatening Shanda Sharer's life multiple times. Shanda's body had been found at 10:30 that morning, and by 8 o'clock that night, police already had 4 suspects, and they were in the process of obtaining warrants for their arrests. By 4 a.m., they would have Melinda Lovelace, Lori Tackett, Hope Rippey, and Tony Lawrence all in custody. So much for that vow of silence, that sisterhood pact of, we're not going to tell anybody. So, but I'm glad they did. They shot themselves in the foot. They told everybody what they had done, and they were caught quickly, and, rightfully so. Shanda's body would end up being examined by a coroner named George Nichols, and he was an expert in identifying the bodies of burn victims. So, a month prior to her death, Shanda had actually gone to the dentist and been fitted for braces. So, using dental records, he was actually able to positively identify Shanda's body. So, I do have a lot of the information from the coroner's report, and I'm actually just kind of going to read off some of this right now. As you can imagine, it's quite a lot. The injuries were very extensive, to say the least. So, I am, like I said, actually going to read this off. Shanda's head and torso were covered in 3rd and 4th degree burns. Her neck, wrists, and ankles had rope burns on them. She had a puncture wound at the base of her neck. The coroner also found 3 lacerations on the top of her scalp that appeared to be from a blunt object. Shanda had suffered stab wounds in her chest, in the bottoms of her feet, just all over her body. And this is actually not talked about often when this story or this case is, spoken of, but Shanda had also been sodomized. And the coroner's report says that she was sodomized by a blunt, cylindrical object, and it had been inserted about 3.5 inches into her. And due to the extent of the internal bleeding, it was determined that all of these things happened to her while she was still alive. Shanda's throat was also covered in soot, a sign that she had been, screaming or, breathing, trying to breathe in oxygen while on fire, while still, alive. She was being burnt alive. Not once, because if you remember, they lit her on fire but decided that wasn't enough. So they went back and lit her on fire again. And even with all of these injuries, the coroner stated that Shanda probably could have made a full recovery had she had gotten the medical attention she so desperately needed. So yeah, I don't know about y'all, but I think after that I might have to go make myself a little drinky drink because it's just intense and it's a lot to talk about and think about, and just how four teenage girls could just do that to another human being. Like, it's beyond me. And the fact that three of these girls didn't even know her, they literally had absolutely no reason, no motive for this other than, you know, following the leader. And I don't really buy that, you know. They had multiple opportunities to stop, to get help, to stand up for themselves or stand up for Shanda, and they chose time and time again to just keep going along for the ride. And yeah, I knew I was going to get pretty heated about this one, and I'm not surprised at all. So I think that's a good stopping point for the second part of the story. Yeah, I knew it was going to be rough to get all of that out, but I wanted everybody to know and to hear, just the brutality, just the shit that they did to her. And in part three, we're really going to be focusing on the trial and, their judgment, what happens to them in all of this. So don't forget, bi weekly videos. I'll have that up for you guys as soon as possible. Thank you for bearing with me talking about all this, gruesome shit. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate those of you who have reached out to me and, give me a lot of positive feedback on, the videos and things like that. And to all of you who actually do watch and share, thank you for the support. It really means a lot to me. So thanks for hanging out with me. And as always, stay spooky, keep it creepy. And if you're from Indiana, watch your back because it's a crazy fucking world out there.